Welcome to the Blockbusters and Birdwalks podcast. I am the curator, Garrett Chaffin-Quiray. Today we have a conversation with a friend, Ed Rosa.
That's me. Hi. My filmmaking partner and I have a YouTube channel, Toothless Richard Productions, where you can see a number of our short films.
So, what do you think of Nomadland?
I thought it was very well done. I thought it felt very authentic. And by the time it was over, I basically said to myself, well, that was pretty good. I'll never watch that again.
I felt very much the same with the adjectives you just used, although I think I may force other people to revisit it with me, because I think it does offer a portrait of a piece of American life that we don't normally see.
Fern works at I believe, a drywall plant in Nevada that closes down. Her husband has died recently of cancer, and she's sort of displaced, and then discovers this group of people who travel around in RVs or vans or whatever, and they've checked out and sort of live off the grid. And the story is basically about Fern learning to live life on the road, as well as dealing with her emotional issues.
One of the things that occurs to me watching this movie, it's relatively short for a prestige movie that wins a lot of awards. It's beneath the 2-hour mark.
I was surprised.
Which I appreciate. It is a small movie, and I think its budget is spread pretty well. It's got only 2 big-name cast members, Frances McDormand, who plays Fern, and David Strathairn, who plays a man she meets along the way named Dave. Otherwise, it's filled out with a cast of people I believe the production company found along the way as fellow nomads on the road. What did you think about those fellow nomads, the supporting cast around our central character, Fern?
When she's at the Amazon warehouse, like kind of having lunch, some of the conversations there felt natural.
Another Smith lyric I have is, when you're laughing and dancing and finally living, you hear my voice in your head and think of me kindly. And then also, the one that means the most to me is, home, is it just a word, or is it something that you carry within you?
It was clear to me that they were non-professional actors, but that wasn't a problem. In fact, I kind of enjoyed that. I saw a film recently that Jake Usna directed called After America that kind of was a similar thing, and he used largely non-professional actors or local actors, and so I thought it did lend some veracity to the proceedings, not being distracted by fame or celebrity or previous work can allow you to sort of submerge yourself into a film.
My concrete thing relates to that is that these people are being defined by the fact of being over 50, usually under 70, beached from a conventional work life for choice reasons because they found it all bankrupt, which is sort of the story of this guru figure, Bob, or else their job discontinued, like Fern is. The entirety of their adulthood has collapsed, but they're not yet Social Security aged people, which means they're not youthful. Most of them are white, with only a couple of exceptions, and all of them show those age lines. They're wrinkled. Their teeth aren't straight. They haven't been cosmetically modified. They're deeply wrinkled. Their bodies are not fit from a gym's workout. Their clothes are perfectly ordinary. And I say that as somebody who has been gym worked out, who does kind of work on a certain fitness and diet regimen, who does have a stable household with a roof. You're looking at people who have given all of that up and have tried to find something else in it. So they're not people that you're generally finding on typical television programs or usual movies.
They're people you see on the street, not on TV.
That's right. There are a couple of memorable sequences when you really are examining who these folks are. They're not all of them named. As you mentioned, there are only a handful who are given names, and the folks who are the amateur performers, I think, just use their personal names, Swanky or Bob.
The credits, like almost everybody, their character name was their actual name. I paid attention to that on the way out.
Later on, maybe it's 10 or 15 minutes down the road in the movie, there's a campfire sequence when Fern has found this nomad group out in the Arizona desert. They're all hanging out by firelight, sharing the stories of how they arrived in this place. I think you hear from a Vietnam veteran who explains he's got deeply difficult PTSD, and he wants to be at peace with himself and the world, and being out in the desert's the way to do it. And you go around the circle, and you just sort of have this close-up of these people explaining these little snapshots the way that you might read a piece of journalism, which of course is where this movie comes from, a piece of journalism.
It's funny because it also did remind me sort of like an AA meeting.
Yeah, that's right.
Well.
Passing the candle.
Yeah, right. And, especially as another thing that seems to link these characters together in a way is that most of them have some kind of significant emotional damage in some way, whether it's Bob having lost his son to suicide or the dude with the PTSD. It's almost like a group therapy thing.
So one of the things that I think is important about considering the source material, it's set in 2011 when we kick things off because of the gypsum plant collapsing in Upper Nevada, where Fern has lived all of her adult life.
Right.
Just after her husband has died from cancer. There's a helpful little remark where she's in a town late at night and is walking the main drag beneath the movie theater marquee that's promoting the Avengers. So the movie is set from where we are today almost 10 years in the past and works its way only just a little bit forward. So that's important to me because I'm a person who bought a house when the last housing market collapsed in 2008. I got a foreclosed house on a deal.
Yeah,
because
like
I was priced out before that.
A real estate buzzard.
The one thing we had going, we were able to continue to earn money through this period. But that was the first brush I ever had in my own life's experience about what if the rug and everything was pulled out from under me.
Right.
We have dependent children, we have animals, we have things that we've spent now 20 years collecting and just trying to get through. And if all of that were erased, I would have been Fern, walking down empty streets late at night, trying to think about all of the things I've missed and either enjoying the fact I'm unmoored from everything I used to consider valuable or hating myself for not being able to keep myself straight.
Right.
What was your reaction to the many lengthy sequences of Fern, largely silent, being alone?
I think it was during the conversation she had with Bob where he comes clean about his son. Everybody has pain. So when she meets David Strathairn's character, Dave, it was sort of clear to me that there was going to be some kind of romantic element. The scene when she goes to stay with Dave when he goes back to his son's place to be a grandfather, Dave kind of offers her, stability, saying like, hey, you can stay here with me. I sort of have feelings for you. You don't have to keep doing this thing. She just gives him the Irish goodbye, and splits. She's still dealing with the loss of her husband. I'm in a committed relationship. The more time I spend with her, the more I worry about life if something were to happen to her and how difficult that would be for me to deal with and how would I move on from that.
Yeah.
I could fully understand her desire to split either because she's not over this thing or because she's frightened of this happening again, which gives way to more quiet moments in the van as she's driving.
Until there's a certain spot where I think she gets her nomad legs,
right,
and is able to be confidently alone. But along the wandering, she luxuriates to a certain degree in what nature can offer, and incidentally, that's one of Bob's main points, that we should, all of us, be more attuned to what nature is and not the yoke, as he phrases it, the yoke of capitalism around our shoulders. If we can be in tune to the world around us, we might be able to find satisfaction in that world, which incidentally is free.
Yeah.
So as we watch her do that, we see that she does become a little bit more aware of herself, a little bit more survivor type, capable, changing her own tire, cooking her meals, able to sort of negotiate where is safe to park or pee, where she can get work to rejuice her Venmo account or her bank account or whatever it might be.
For the next trip,
And that all seems to be a necessary part of this Nomadland experience. I think it's early in the piece, she sits down with her friend Linda, who turns her on to some clues about how this ought to work and how to be safe and where to go to meet the tribe of people like you who are wanderers like you. All of them like you, dealing with the troubles of life not turning out the way they intended.
Yeah, the American dream sort of going south.
And they have this conversation about how this character, Linda, showed up somewhere in her middle 50s and looked ahead to a Social Security administrator to find out what her benefit would be at full retirement, and learned that it was $500 or so.
Yeah.
And laments, but I've been working since I was something like 12 or 15, as a great many of us have been working part-time and full-time, and with odd combinations over the many years of our lives, to see that the public benefit intended to help you through your retirement, there isn't one.
Right. Well, and you can't reasonably be expected, the older you get, you're just not going to be able to work.
And there are little notes of that where you see characters talk about, my knees don't quite work, can you help me up? Fern deliciously refusing Dave's overtures about getting off of cigarettes.
Oh, I got you these.
What are they?
Licorice sticks.
I can't smoke licorice sticks, Dave.
I know, but you can chew on these, and they help or curb the urge.
I'm not going to quit smoking, Dave.
And I admire that sense of independence and self-direction. And at the same time, I am visited by memories of people in my life who have wandered away from the defined way you're to achieve a certain kind of material success in American life, which is usually about possession of a home that's yours.
Right.
It's about having a bank account that's substantial, or building a retirement or a pension that will always replenish the funds that you need to go on vacation periodically, to maintain a car, certainly to eat well and have good medical care, all of that. And I'm at an age now where I'm starting to anticipate what a retirement may look like some years hence, and I'm confused about what that can possibly be. So here's another thing about Nomadland that got my attention, because this is definitely in my field of view. Being awake without much to do can be tremendously boring.
Yeah.
And I've really experienced that through this turn of COVID, despite having dependent children at home, despite having a certain amount of income possible through online computer-based work. I have whole swaths of my day over the last 2 years or so where I don't have a lot of really pressing stuff to do.
Right.
And that sense of being capital B bored creeps up on me. And I'm like, I shouldn't feel this way. I'm young enough to be doing something.
Yeah.
But sometimes not doing something, having a full rest, is important. Sometimes renewing friendships is important. Sometimes being loving to your family. That's all of these things are important. But even so, there are whole swaths of a day in these times that are capital B boring.
Yeah.
And I felt like, wow, this group of nomads, whether they chose this lifestyle for good reason or were forced into it through bad circumstance, as seems to be Fern's case, a lot of their life is filled with how do you deal with boredom by yourself. And social interaction isn't always very satisfying because people are disagreeable a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
And the strength of the movie's message, I think, is that we watch Fern grapple with that too and become okay with basically kissing people off.
Yeah. It's easy to sort of focus on the sadness or the despair or the loss. But at the same time, and I think this is one of the things the film does well, there's obviously an upside to this freedom. And like you see those moments when she's bathing in the creek, for example. Or there was a little bit where she's like eating lunch with Dave, and they're like in the Badlands or something, and they're just like sitting on this cliff overlooking, some magnificent gorge or something. She does enjoy the freedom. I found in my life that unemployment is both a blessing and a curse. You do have more time to do things you might not ordinarily have time to do. At the same time, not having important things to do can take a toll on your self-esteem. It's not that simple to fill these moments in your life, this time that you've sort of been given by, being absolved of your responsibilities in terms of work, to be productive. And when she'd get these jobs, like when she's cleaning like the restroom at like the national grasslands or whatever, I get the sense that she enjoyed that job.
Right. It's an understandable thing with an outcome. A clean toilet seat for somebody to use, and tomorrow you'll come back and do it again.
And it, where a lot of people, like I felt bad right away because like the toilet's filthy, and I'm like, oh man, like people are such animals, that's terrible. But you can sort of tell, this is expressed non-verbally, but it seemed to me she was taking pride in her job.
Yeah.
She had no problem doing it. And in fact, it's like, no, this is great. I'll be like a park ranger for a little while.
Not a sense of defeat, but now what's the next thing I can do to progress down my life's journey?
Right.
You use the phrase non-verbally, And I think that the movie is filled with interesting nonverbal moments, particularly from our lead, McDormand, who is a powerful actress. For me, leaving the movie, I mostly discount what she has done. I mostly don't consider her such a red-letter great actress, which is generally how she's described by the press. And yet I chew on her performances, and I think the nonverbal component here is powerful. So just a brief comparison. 3 Billboards. And she's a really gnarly monster in that movie. And she's a scene chewer in that movie. And she takes apart people in that movie. And she's extremely aggressive. And she's profane. And she's difficult. She's very masculine. And this is a different kind of a performance. And as soon as I remembered, well, she's done all this other work too, she does a really remarkable thing in this movie, being a very diminutive, and in my way of thinking of it, a kind of a square personality, who, by her own description, was married young and left her natal family for this man, Beau, who she lives her life with, basically for one another until his terminal disease kills him, and she's robbed of that companionship and the central thing of her life, being married. They never had children. She kissed off her family, and there's a vivid sequence when she goes to visit her sister.
Yeah.
But the point about nonverbal in McDormand is she does a lot of things which are not like other performances she has given. When she giggles, she covers her mouth. When she emotes, she tends to be very close-lipped. When she's angry, she says things.
Go over there!
And you watch her embrace in Welcome or in Departure various friends of the road, Swanky and Linda. And there are subtle things between these seasoned performers, Strathairn and McDormand. When they're working together, he'll reach out and sort of poke her shoulder to say, here I am, we're together.
Right.
And you can see she notices that, but can't make eye contact. And it's a choice, an actorly choice, to keep this woman, this widow, in the containment of either her sadness, her self-confidence, her independence, maybe all of those things and other things I'm unaware of being who I am. But she's able to create that performance all with nonverbal gesture, with the way that she's shaped physically, the way that she's wearing denim a lot, the way that her body is covered most of the time.
She's like a modern-day Buster Keaton.
Yeah, that's right, with this big, gigantic grin. Because when McDormand turns on her charm and really decides to smile at somebody, it's a very winning, very welcome smile. And she does that, in my memory of the movie, with these close women friends or a couple of the youths that she meets along the way. There's a young man that they have this cigarette trade because they keep bumping into each other down the road as they're nomads sort of in similar pathways.
Yeah, they don't say bye, they say see you down the road.
Yeah, and it's something moving about that, where the charm that she has exhibited in other roles shows up. I have to admit that at the very end of the movie, when Bob and Fern are having a sit-down, I got all weepy.
It's like my dad used to say, what's remembered lives. I maybe spent too much of my life just remembering Bob. You know what I mean?
I can relate. I rarely ever talk about my son, but today would be his 33rd birthday, and 5 years ago he took his life. And I can still barely say that in a sentence. And for a long time, every day was, the question was, how can I be alive on this earth when he's not? And I didn't have an answer. And those were some hard days. But I realized that I could honor him by helping people and serving people. It gives me a reason to go through the day. Some days that's all I've got. And out here, there's a lot of people our age, and inevitably there's grief and loss. And a lot of them don't get over it either. And that's okay. That's okay. One of the things I love most about this life is that there's no final goodbye.
I found that very winning, because I've begun to experience some of those benchmarks. I want to contrast that with the scene where Fern shows up at her sister's place. And the setup, of course, is the van she calls Vanguard.
Yeah.
Has broken down and is in need of a pretty dramatic repair. And she's been advised to give it up because it's, got no real value. And she explains to the mechanic, well, no, this is my home. I need this to be preserved, but she needs money. She doesn't have the money. Her sister does. She ends up going to the sister by bus and being housed there for a period of what seems like a couple of days. But it's tense because the sister's place is the achievement of a certain late 50s dream of what American life ought to be.
That's like having her quote-unquote failure kind of like rubbed in her face.
A little bit. And you can see that she's uncomfortable in the surroundings. She's got a guest bedroom to go enjoy. She's invited to stay long haul. But you equally see the great tension that exists. And it's pointed out when they're having an after-meal sit-down with the sister, the brother-in-law, and I think a couple of guests, because it appears the brother-in-law is a real estate speculator.
Yeah, right.
And Fern, she articulates this position I think a lot of us have got.
It's strange that you encourage people to invest their whole life savings, go into debt, just to buy a house they can't afford.
That's resonant with me, as I mentioned earlier. That's how we got our house.
Sure.
That we were people who were able to just negotiate with the bank for a price that we felt we could pay. We were wrong. It was too much, but we just never lost our jobs. And we're slowly over time able to get other work to supplement and finally get our lives straight. But we're only a paycheck away from losing the whole thing.
People have like an innate responsibility to other people, and that when somebody knows something that somebody else doesn't, it's totally predatory. I would expect that would be like a worst case scenario when in fact it's what they were trying to encourage. It was like in that Simpsons with the bill on Capitol Hill.
You're going to mangle somebody.
You're going to ruin people. Yeah. You're going to ruin lives this way.
Well, the movie includes a really winning sequence that speaks to all that you have just said, and that is Fern's return to her hometown, where she visits the gypsum mill that is open to anybody who wants to walk through because it's been abandoned.
Yeah.
She goes to her old home, which she describes as just a company track house. And that's all that it is as she walks through the door, which is unlocked, to look out on the desert that she celebrates as this wonderful attribute of this silly house at the end of a cul-de-sac. But we watch the way that a large corporation that built a very small, but in its moment, a vibrant town. I think she passes a school, and you see the playground equipment. You see the civic development of this small town that has collapsed and just left behind its physical infrastructure, the homes and the public buildings that nobody's using. And she walks through this in a long series of tracking shots in complete quiet to address what has been lost with the global collapse following the Great Recession of 2008 up through 2011, which coincided with her husband's terminal illness and her job discontinuance. All of these terrible calamities that were visited right on her, the spear point of capitalist failure. And then she wanders off screen left, going out into the desert. The camera shifts with her out to the chain link fence in the backyard, and then cuts and we're back in that van and she's driving along. So here's my funny little extra textual reference point. We're watching a figure, our protagonist, negotiating a circumstance that is as once terribly hostile and filled with targets of opportunity, but also targets of opportunity. There's a way forward, but it's always tracking. It's always moving. In a way, she's a kind of a nomad land shark looking for the next place to find work. You're always hurtling forward. She is the tumbleweed that keeps blowing with the wind. And that's very much how Arnold negotiates those movies, to bring that parallel to the natural end of that silly little aside. But I really felt that way, that she is not going to gather moss. So another winning moment. When we see her jumping into friendship with Swanky, who's a mentor figure, teaches her some things about life on the road, Swanky eventually explains that she's got metastatic cancer that's gone into the brain. She refused all medical care, will not die inside of an institution, but outside. In particular, she tells a story about being on a kayak, surrounded by swallows, in a river around a bend. It's the deity visiting on us something truly magnificent. And when we get enough of those, it's okay to go.
Right. Yeah.
And we learn soon after that, in fact, Swanky has succumbed to her disease. There is a campfire to talk about and remember her by throwing rocks in the fire, which was a sacred thing to Swanky, that Fern participates in. All of those gestures, you keep moving until you amass enough of these things and your machinery wears out.
Right.
That's the natural end. That's what this movie's pointed to, and we conclude then by watching that van just shuttle down another open highway to the next thing.
Whatever the next thing is, yeah.
Let me switch gears. I think you accurately summarized the synopsis of the movie when we began talking. It's not a movie that's really divided into acts the way that traditional storytelling in movies tends to work.
No.
It's just a series of vignettes, a set of sequences across multiple seasons in the life of somebody who could very well, if this were an actual person and not played by a Hollywood star, would still be living this way. Given all of that, it's a weird movie because as a person who teaches film studies, I'm looking for those hinge marks. The narrative makes this choice because of the protagonist's behavior, motivating the next thing to happen.
Right.
And that's already happened before the movie begins. She's lost her husband, she's lost her home. So another consideration. As I paired this movie and thought about what does this mean to say it's the Academy Award-winning movie, that is, the American cinematic forefathers and mothers who judge the merit of our present circumstance said this is something we should celebrate forever. And I compare that against bigger budgeted things, which were much more spectacular and well seen. And the one that jumped to mind, of course, was Return of the King.
Movies are supposed to be escapism, right? Well, and that's
an approach many people agree with and want.
Right, and I understand that because, like, when you have all of these wonderful artists and craftspeople who have these huge budgets and they can take you to wherever they want and tell you any kind of story you want, like, why the hell are you going to make me spend an hour and 45 minutes, depressed watching these sad people? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, come on. Like, where's her happy ending? Like, why is she not eloping with Dave?
Yeah.
That's like a little juvenile and a little entitled. And I try to check myself if I find myself.
You do have to adjust your
falling into
expectations
that
to accept the terms of this different kind of entertainment.
because it's I mean, filmmaking is an art. It's a mode of expression for the filmmaker, and if the artist finds value in this story, who am I to fault it for its lack of escapism?
While we were setting up this conversation, we had a couple of back and forth remarks out of the recorder. And one of them was about the sense of self-congratulation that AMPAS can perform by granting this movie the Academy Award. Meaning, a lot of people, most of them white, most of them male in tilt, over 50, judge these awards.
Very wealthy.
And so those people of means are probably able to see this movie and think about the people they've thumped over the decades of their life, the relationships that they have not performed their part to maintain, the friendships and family members that have had very different unpleasant outcomes, or the people who have just had the bad luck of being born in circumstances that went against them. Trades workers, unionists, people who made drywall, in the case of this example, whose lives didn't turn out not because they were undeserving or bad people, but because the circumstances were stacked too far against them and they couldn't absorb it. So this is a way for the landed gentry of our time to say, we observe you.
Right.
Thank you for your hard work.
Yeah.
Please come see our movie to see how we observe you, and then Fast and Furious 10, 11, and 12 will be here soon.
For like the Academy to vote for this, they're either celebrating this movie because on some level they feel celebrating it absolves them of guilt, absolves them of any responsibility. I compare it sort of to, it's like going to see animals in the zoo. Oh, isn't this neat? Here's this crazy, like, subsection of people of whom I'll never be like. Right. I'll never be in this situation, and now here they are served up under glass for me to consume very comfortably from, my, home theater or, from...
Oh, because it was Hulu released simultaneously to the theater, so it's very much,
Right,
with my air conditioning and my Jiffy Pop.
Right, and so, I think I found that, like, when it comes to Oscars, they tend to really love movies that make themselves feel better about themselves. And I think that's movies like Nomadland, and that's movies about Hollywood.
Well, the two complications to this read, and I like the read, because in the Let's Go Into the Deep Heart of Africa read, the Dr. Livingston of this movie is a Chinese-born national,
right.
Chloe Zhao.
Right.
So that's a woman of color who's not American, looking at the problem of largely white boomers in this small society, within our society, this Nomadland group that the journalist's work centers on. She's our host. As I understand it, her earlier movie, The Rider, got some attention because it did well on the independent movie circuit and in small release. Frances McDormand and a producer friend thought that was quite good and optioned Nomadland, and then brought it to Chloe Zhao and said, hey, listen, we think you might be the person to bring this to life. And she agreed, and then adapted the book with her own effort, her own trouble. She's credited as the writer, director, and editor of the movie.
Which I thought was interesting.
Which means that we have to credit this movie, more so than a lot of others, is to being a Zhao piece.
Yeah.
And she doesn't resemble, on the surface at least, very many of the people we meet in the course of this movie. She's a full generation younger or more.
Yeah.
She's from a different nation by birth. She probably has a different language and cultural background before she became American educated, and I assume thrive in this circumstance. Consequently, an outsider is our inside scoop on this weird slice of American life. And of course, this wasn't produced with mainline MGM money. This was produced for a small amount of money. I think $5 million is what I found in my research, which is, to you and me, quite a lot of money. That sets us up for life. However, if for movie scale, that's not even what Angelina Jolie probably required to show up for The Eternals.
Exactly.
Which is Chloe Zhao's next movie, as I understand it.
Oh, she's directing that one?
Right.
Oh, crazy. Okay. That's
so her profile is hopping all over the place this last couple of years.
When you put it in the context of white boomers, white boomers have kind of become the enemy in this era where people seem to be looking for more progressive, different voices from all different races and types of people who have been considered marginalized due to white boomers. And then so here we have a person who ticks all of these kind of boxes of the progressive stuff people seem to be looking for, who was then turned around and made a movie that says, well, look at these poor white boomers.
Yeah, right. Just as you were talking, I was thinking about all of the bad people, the villains, almost to the one, in the Jason Bourne movies, are like white boomer men.
Right.
All the controlling agents, and we're looking at their obverse in this movie, who are in various ways typical of their age. Overweight, their bodies are slower, they need spectacles to see. There's a really funny detail when we're looking at Dave and Fern are working together doing fast food preparation at a national park, and Dave shows his flip phone. My son had a baby, and he shows a picture of the infant.
Right.
And his flip phone, that's one funny little detail.
Right.
I had a flip phone in 2011, 12, 13. I didn't give it up to 2014. And on the flip phone, he's got a little post-it note that says pen, so he can get into his phone. It's a funny celebration for how Hollywood wants to depict itself and reward itself for its depictions by giving this movie its top award. And almost nobody's seen this movie, albeit this movie was released right as COVID just peaked in the early part of 2020, so that hurt its capability at the box office. It still did okay globally in terms of its small investment in producing the movie and a pretty good haul in global box office and some sell-through, I'm sure, through Hulu and other streaming services. But this is nowhere close to being a blockbuster.
Oh, yeah.
And absolutely nobody on a global scale has seen or has heard of this movie.
Right.
So it's celebrating the small mouse compared to the giant elephant that something like a Vin Diesel movie would be. So this movie is definitely not made for the crowd that's turning out for Transformers, which is where people probably saw Frances McDormand for the first time on a mass scale because she had to pay some bills.
Well, that's not how she can afford to do Nomadland.
She's got a husband who makes movies too, and a brother-in-law who makes movies. You know, she's got projects to support, and probably thought it would be a hoot to be involved in a CGI spectacle. But this maybe is where her heart is. She's listed as one of the producers of the movie. Received an Oscar for her participation now, which is a nice mantelpiece. Like, I'm a maker. Not just hired help. I'm a maker. And that's important.
Best Picture Oscar goes to the producers.
Right. And that's a small set of people, and she's one of them. So I think that's... She's a woman who helped kind of make that thing happen, as directed by a woman who was celebrated for her contribution shepherding this project. I guess my point is, I've learned a phrase that deals with how to judge the work of undergraduates as a teacher of undergraduates. And it's sometimes they're not ready yet. They're not capable yet. They're not sensitive enough yet. And I can apply that to my own memories of my own development. And while I was an academically successful young person turning into an adult, I'm meeting a lot of people who don't have that set of skills yet. They don't have a sensitivity to think about a person who's made a choice to live in a van, who then uses a 5-gallon bucket as a toilet as something that's worthwhile and something to have to figure out how to do that properly yet. There's a sensitivity a lot of folks don't have for aging. A lot of sensitivity people don't always have for beauty standards which are not Kardashian-centered.
Right.
Of music standards that aren't defined by Kanye having just released a new album, which I'm sure I'll never listen to.
Right.
I'm not for him yet. And we're all subject to that. And so a movie like Nomadland is just a really, really narrow pie slice of what the potential audience might be all about. But it's a valid pie slice. I often confront people who, I'm bored, I'm indifferent, I don't like it. And when you peel back the onion, well, what are the reasons for that?
Right.
Whether it's my own kids complaining about what I watch at home, why don't you like it? And it's often because it requires a different form of patience for a different kind of entertainment than the lowest hanging fruit of racing cars, squibs, and naked bodies.
Right.
I respond to that too.
Sure.
But I'm also trained to realize there are other ways to enjoy myself, and this is one of them.
There's a lot of different kinds of stories I'm happy to hear. There are so many hues in the artistic rainbow, because that's kind of like how I am with music. In fact, I'm often jealous of people who are into a certain style or a certain scene, because those people will tend to have a much deeper knowledge of artists and songs in whatever scene it is that they're steeped into. However, there's so much to be consumed, and I only have so much time. That's why, I can enjoy something like Nomadland at the same time as I enjoy...
This is Blockbusters and Birdwalks, a conversation between Garrett Chaffin-Quiray and
Ed Rosa.
Boop boopity doo.